Howdy, ladies and gentlemen. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. Thomas Jefferson said, "If you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done." Benjamin Franklin said, "Without continual growth and progress, such words as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning." Basically, get off your duff, get to working, you've got dreams, you've got goals, you've got to do what it takes to get them. Like, subscribe, comment, show what your opinion is. Let me know if you like what you've seen. And I thank you for your support. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is that our education system and its failures has nothing to do with the politics as much as certain simple desires. Yes, politics causes a lot of the problems. I'm not going to deny that. But there are actually simpler explanations as to the failures of our education. And that's what I'm going to explain today. I'm not going to use fancy terms. I'm going to explain this as a redneck would. Because once you get to thinking about what I have to say, I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me. And I want you to look at what's going on in the world, and I want you to pay attention. I want you to see that what's going on in our education system is as much to do with what these people are doing as it is about what's going on inside of our classrooms. Let's start out with a simple story to highlight the first reason why I believe that education is the way it is today, and a lot of how certain so-called experts explain the way that they explain things. When the Challenger exploded back in the 80s, they held a committee. I'm not sure if it was congressional approved or if it was presidential. But on that committee, a scientist by the name of Richard Philip Feynman was on the committee. And NASA, knowing exactly what caused it and the reason behind what caused it, decided to sit there in front of this committee, not paying attention to the fact that as they gave this exceedingly complicated explanation, that Richard Philip Feynman was on this committee that was listening and investigating. And Richard Philip Feynman was one of the scientists that took part in the Manhattan Project, the project that created the nuclear weapons that we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then advanced to all of what it's created today. He also had spent decades teaching young minds in how to understand physics. And as he listened to these complicated explanations, they got done. It came to his time to ask a question. He picks up the seal that was at the heart of the explosion, drops it into a glass of ice water, and goes, "So this is the reason why the Challenger exploded." He said, "What you're saying is that for some reason you didn't pay attention to the fact that this simple seal was not rated to deal with low temperatures, which was a surprise because you were of that this was being taking place in Florida." Now I'm paraphrasing a lot of this, but he took this complicated explanation that they were using to hide what had happened, and he made it super simple. Nowadays, if you take a look at what you hear on TV, these so-called experts, a lot of times, and these people connected to the government and to economics and science and all of this, give these really complicated explanations so that somebody that is going through our education system will sit there in awe and not realize that they are being conned. That's the best way to explain it. They're using fancy terms. They're using $1.50 words when two penny words will do. And this isn't just coming from one political party. This is coming from both political parties. And our education system is teaching kids that the complicated stuff comes from those who are highly educated, and that you can't understand it unless you get an education in what these people are talking about. That isn't the case. You can simplify everything and everybody can understand it. We've seen this recently in several matters. But our teachers, because they're attached to a union, and because they're being told this is how you teach, are teaching our kids, and some of us, well, I got lucky. I didn't have to go through this, but quite a few of those that are younger than myself went through an education where they were told, you can't understand this unless you get a higher education. That's not the truth at all. Another way that our education has been hurt is the simple fact of that there are groups of people, some of them an older generation, some of them are more recent generations, depending on the area that you live, that are under the impression that you don't need to know more than the basics, that kids are spending too much time in school, and that this would ruin them from being able to enjoy simple lives like what they have. Now, in country areas such as the Appalachians, and I'm pretty certain that J.D. Vance knows this firsthand as well as I do, the older generations know that they had a happy life without even having to finish school. They don't understand why young folks need to understand computers. Thankfully, my grandfather did understand this. But they don't understand why young folks need to understand graphing calculators, computers. They don't understand why they have to understand more than what it takes to be a farmer or to work in a plant. They see that they raised up their families without having all of these modern conveniences, and so they're under the impression that all this does is complicate life. And then, when you look at urban areas, you've got these gangs that have taken over these communities. These gangs want those kids to not be in school so that they can use them to run drugs, to be a cover for their activities. Their activities are protected because these kids don't have their lives destroyed by a judicial system that rightfully understands that these kids are being used as victims. And so these gang members make schools intolerable. They make these schools violent to the point that these kids in these schools feel like it's better to get out on the street as quickly as possible because they can make money. And then there's a third group in all of this. I know of these groups because it's the same whether it's rural or urban. You have a class of citizens that believe that the best approach is to not work and to just get by so you can collect welfare or find a reason to get on disability. They think that that's all you need to do is just get by long enough so that you can collect those checks. A friend of my mother's became a teacher with all the dreams that somebody has when they want to become a teacher. And she started being a student teacher for a little while in a public school. And so she asked these kids what would they like to do. And quite a few of them, if not the majority, in this very backwoods school said they'd like to draw. And she's like, all of you want to be artists? No, they would like to draw a check from the government. And by the way, these were white kids. These weren't black kids because it was a very backwoods area. And unfortunately at that point, common sense had not kicked in as to who could live certain places. And these white kids were wanting to either get on disability or get welfare. That was their dream. So you have three groups fighting via their voting and their input, fighting the advancement of our school systems. The last group that I'm going to discuss, or last mindset, because it's technically two groups, but it's all the same cause. There is people that want to force their political ideals onto children. They don't want to give them the ability to think critically. And you may be thinking, because I'm the redneck thinker and I must only be thinking, that it's the liberals, those members of the Democratic Socialist Working Party, that are doing this. Because of my baby sister, who is 13 years younger than me, I'm also aware of the fact that there are also those that claim to be conservative that are trying to shape minds as well. It's not just the modern liberals. And mind you, these are modern liberals, not classic liberals. And it's not the better educated conservatives that are trying to do this. No. If you teach actual facts, and I mean this quite seriously, if you teach actual facts and let kids figure out critical thinking, if you teach critical thinking and actual facts, kids will come to a conclusion. It may not be the conclusion that you want them to come to, but they are thinking on their own. But the teachers' unions don't want this. Those conservatives that slip through, that unfortunately I worry about some of them, because what was taught to my baby sister made me angry. Why? Because he wasn't telling the truth when he was teaching her. My mother and my sister actually had to get me to not go to the school system, because that guy's teachings were that bad. I dislike teaching kids lies, but that's the only way that you're going to sway them to a political way of thinking. And this is ruining education. I don't care what your political beliefs are. I care that kids need to learn critical thinking and need to learn facts. But that's not what's being done. And I hate this. This is pushing these kids towards something instead of allowing them to naturally move that direction. And this is hurting education just as much. These three different areas that I just covered, if you actually sit down and think about it, are the real reason why not just education in schools, but people's grasp of what's going on in the world is so skewed. You have these folks that are trying to make economics so complicated. You listen to people like AOC, Bernanke, all of those folks, and they give these complicated economic theories. But most of the time, it just settles down to this. The government is greedy. Big business is greedy. Which it means that people are having to spend more on taxes and spend more on products. Money that they shouldn't have to spend, but they have to because you can't say anything and you can't do anything most of the time. There are solutions, but people have been flummoxed or people have been taught that you can't make moves that will actually fix it. Now, later on, I plan on discussing a few simple solutions, but I thought I would give you a grasp on what can be done about our education system. Probably few people are going to listen to this, but I thought I'd take you along a path that some dumb redneck who's paid attention to the education system for many years, for many decades at this point, has realized. And maybe if you think about what I just explained, it will cause you to go, maybe we can fix these things. This has been Paul, the Redneck Thinker. I seriously want you to think about these things, and y'all have a good day now. Bye.